The great crystal hall of the galactic council shimmered with lights of every color. Hundreds of alien beings sat in perfect circles, their forms glowing softly in the peaceful chamber. For 3,000 years, this place had been the heart of harmony in the galaxy. Wars were things of the ancient past, solved by talk and understanding. But today, fear filled the air like poison. Ambassador Zephyr of the Luxari race stood at the center of the hall. His body was made of living crystal, clear as water but shot through with veins of blue light that pulsed with his emotions. Right now those veins flickered red with terror. His voice rang out across the chamber, carrying the weight of desperation. Friends of the council, he began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. I bring news that will shake the very foundations of our peaceful worlds. The Korech Empire has begun a war of total destruction against us. Wave of shocked sounds rippled through the chamber. The thorny delegates who looked like walking flowers with petals for faces rustled their leaves in distress. The voidlings, beings of pure energy who floated in containment fields, pulsed with alarmed colors. Even the ancient crystalline elders who had lived for thousands of years showed signs of fear. Council primarily arose from her golden throne. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy. Her metallic skin polished to a mirror shine. Golden tendrils grew from her head like hair, and they drooped with sadness as she spoke. Tell us what has happened, old friend, she said to Zephyr. Speak plainly, for we must understand the full scope of this threat. Zephyr's crystal form flickered as he gathered his thoughts. Cora came from the volcanic systems near the galactic rim. They are made of living rock and metal, born in the fires of their harsh worlds. For centuries they kept to themselves, but something has changed. They have declared war on all peaceful life. He gestured in a holographic display filled the air above the chamber, showed star maps with red zones spreading like a disease across the galaxy's edge. System after system marked with the symbol of total destruction. In the past cycle they have destroyed 12 of our worlds. Zephyr continued, not conquered, not occupied, but completely destroyed. They burn the forests, poison the waters, and kill every living thing they find. Their armies are unstoppable. Our weapons adapt to our defenses faster than we can create new ones. A delegate from the Moss people, beings who look like walking trees, spoke up with a voice like wind through leaves. What of our fleets? Surely our combined forces can hold them back. Zephyr's light dimmed to almost nothing. Our fleets are gone. Korok ships are like flying mountains, covered in weapons that can crack planets. They don't follow the rules of civilized war. They attack without warning, show no mercy, and never retreat. Our captains, trained in the arts of peace, don't know how to fight such monsters. The chamber fell silent. These species had known only peace for so long that the concept of true war was almost beyond their understanding. They had small defense forces, more like police than armies. They had never faced an enemy that wanted to destroy rather than conquer. A young Luxari in the crowd called out, "What can we do? How do we fight something so terrible?" Zephyr looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 100 different species. I have studied the ancient archives, searching for any weapon or strategy that might help us. Most of what I found was useless to us, but there was one thing, one possibility that might save us all. He paused, seeming to gather courage for what he was about to say. In the deepest, most restricted files, I found references to a species that was quarantined long ago, a race that the ancient ones feared so much they sealed them away from the rest of the galaxy. Gasp went through the chamber. Several delegates activated their emergency shields, afraid of even hearing about such beings. Cannot mean ... whispered Orlia, her golden tendrils trembling. The humans, Zephyr said, and the word fell like a stone into still water. Deathworlders from the planet they call Earth. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Half the delegates fled the chamber, others activated panic alarms. The voidlings flickered and went dark. Even mentioning the humans was forbidden by the oldest laws of the Council, but Zephyr pressed on. Listen to me. Warnings passed down from our ancestors, but our ancestors never faced extinction. The humans were quarantined because they were dangerous, yes, but they were also the only species that could fight. An elderly thorny delegate, his petals brown with age, spoke in a shaking voice. The archives say they came from a world of death, planet where the very air was poison, where the ground shook and split, where fire fell from the sky. They were killers, predators, beings who knew only violence. Yes, Zephyr agreed. But they were also the only species that could survive anything. The ancient ones sealed them away, not because they were evil, but because they were too dangerous to exist alongside peaceful races. They fought not for conquest, but for survival. Another delegate, floating jellyfish-like creature, pulsed with nervous colors. Even if we could contact them, even if they still exist, why would they help us? We're the ones who locked them away. Zephyr moved to the center of the chamber, his crystal form blazing with desperate hope. Because according to the archives, humans have one trait that might save us all. They protect those who cannot protect themselves. The ancient ones wrote that humans would fight to the death to defend the weak, even if they gained nothing from it. Council Prime Orla stood silent for a long moment, her golden tendrils moving in patterns that showed deep thought. Around her, the remaining delegates waited for her decision. She was the oldest being in the galaxy, one of the few who had been alive when the quarantine was first put in place. I remember the day we sealed the barriers around their system, she said finally. Was young then, barely 1,000 years old. The vote was not unanimous. Some believed we should try to understand them, to find a way to live alongside them, but fear won, as it often does. She looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of her fellow leaders. Now that fear may be our only hope. The humans were sealed away with all their ships, their weapons, their knowledge of war. If they still live, if they still remember what it means to fight, they might be our salvation. A new voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. It was Ambassador Void, representative of the shadow peoples, being so ancient that even Orlia looked young beside them. The seals can be broken, the shadow said. Quarantine barriers can be lowered, but once we open that door, we cannot close it again. And GT, the humans will be free to roam the galaxy as they choose. Pass. And GT, the chamber fell silent again. Choice before them was terrible but simple. They could die as they had lived in peace, or they could unleash something that might be worse than the Korach themselves. Zephyr stepped forward, One final time, the Korech will be here. In 10 cycles, they will burn our worlds and kill our children. We can face them as we are and die with honor, or we can call upon the Deathworlders and take our chances with devils we do not know. Or Aurelia closed her eyes and made the decision that would change the galaxy. Forever send the message, break seals, call the humans, and may the Ancient Ones forgive us for what we are about to unleash. The vote was taken in silence, each delegate placing their hand on the crystal of decision. When the light faded, the choice was made. The message would be sent to the forbidden system, to the planet of death, to the sleeping giants who had been waiting in the shadows for 200 years. The humans would be contacted. The Deathworlders would be awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. The message arrived at Earth Defense Command at 3:47 hours ship time. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee in the command center of the EDF battleship Valkyrie when the quantum communicator began screaming alarms that had not sounded for 2 centuries. Morrison sat down his cup and stared at the machine. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his face from the Mars colonial wars. Cybernetic implants glowed softly blue around his left eye, a reminder of the shrapnel that had nearly killed him during the Titan rebellion. Like most humans who had lived through the colony wars, he carried the marks of survival on his body. What the hell is that thing doing? Asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, the ship's tactical officer. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, born on the asteroid mining stations where a moment's hesitation meant death in the cold vacuum of space. Morrison walked over to the ancient communicator. It was a relic from first contact, built with alien technology that humanity had reverse engineered and improved. The Council had given it to them as a way to call for help if they ever needed rescue from their quarantine. They had never expected it to work in reverse. It's a message from outside the barrier, Morrison said, his voice tight with disbelief. Someone is trying to reach us through the quantum link. The message was short and desperate, came in broken galactic standard, a language that few humans still remembered. The translation appeared on the screen in letters that flickered with interference from the long journey between stars. Council ... dying. Korech Empire ... help ... please. Morrison read the message 3 times before the reality of it sank in. After 200 years of isolation, the galaxy was calling for help. The same aliens who had locked humanity away were now begging them to come back. Get me Admiral Cooper, Morrison ordered, and wake up the linguistics team. We need to know exactly what this message says. Within an hour, the command center was filled with officers and specialists. Admiral Ryan Cooper stood at the center of the room, a man whose presence seemed to fill every corner of the space. He was older than Morrison, a veteran of the Earth Defense Wars who had been there when the barriers first went up. Report, Cooper said in his growly voice. Dr. Helen Davis, the ship's linguist, stepped forward. She was a thin woman with pale skin who spent most of her time buried in books and computer files. Sir, the message is definitely from the Galactic Council. The encryption codes match the ones in our historical files, asking for help against something called the Korech Empire. The Council. Cooper's eyebrows rose. The same council that voted to quarantine us because we were too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. Yes, sir, the message is badly damaged, but the core meaning is clear. They're under attack and they want our help. Sergeant Danny Walsh, head of the Marine contingent, laughed bitterly. He was a big man with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could carry across a battlefield. So when they needed to feel safe, they locked us away. But when they need someone to fight for them, suddenly we're there. Best friends. Morrison understood the anger. Every human alive had grown up knowing they were prisoners in their own solar system. The aliens had been afraid of them, afraid of what humanity might do to their perfect, peaceful galaxy. So they had built barriers that no human ship could cross, turning the entire solar system into a jail. What do we know about this core empire? Cooper asked. Communications officer Lisa Bennett pulled up what little information they had. She was young, barely out of the academy, with the kind of enthusiasm that only came from never having seen real war. Not much, sir. Our databases show them as a minor species from the galactic rim, silicon-based life forms, very aggressive, but they kept to themselves. Not anymore, apparently, Morrison said. If the Council is desperate enough to call us, things must be bad out there. Cooper walked to the main display and stared at the star charts. The barriers that surrounded human space were clearly marked, a perfect sphere that had kept humanity trapped for 2 centuries. Beyond those barriers lay the galaxy they had once dreamed of exploring. Sir, said Lieutenant Rodriguez, we're picking up energy signatures from the barrier stations. Looks like they're powering down. Everyone in the room turned to stare at her. The barriers had been maintained by automated stations for 200 years, powered by alien technology that humanity had never fully understood. If they were shutting down, it meant the Council was serious about letting humans back into the galaxy. Confirm that, Cooper ordered. Rodriguez worked at her console, her fingers flying over the controls. Confirmed, sir, dropping across all sectors. This rate, they'll be completely down within 6 hours. The room fell silent. After 2 centuries, the prison doors were opening. But why now? What was happening out there that was so terrible that the aliens would risk freeing humanity? Dr. Davis spoke up again. Sir, I've been analyzing the message more carefully. There are references to something called total war, an extinction level threat. The Corech aren't just attacking the Council worlds, they're trying to destroy them completely. Cooper nodded. Slowly, a war of extinction. That's something the Council species would never understand. They've been peaceful for so long. They've forgotten what real war looks like. Walsh grinned, but it wasn't a happy expression. But we haven't forgotten, have we, sir? Morrison looked around the room at his fellow officers. Every one of them had been shaped by conflict. Earth itself had forged them in the fires of natural disasters, resource wars, and the constant struggle to survive in a universe that seemed determined to kill them. Even during the quarantine, humanity had continued to fight among themselves, competing for resources in their limited space. What are your orders, sir? Morrison asked. Cooper was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision. We're going to answer their call, but we're going to do it our way. Get me a full battle group. Want the Valkyrie, the Thunderstorm, the Iron Maiden, and the Reaper. Full Marine complements, maximum armament, sir. Lisa Bennett said hesitantly. Shouldn't we try to contact the council first? Find out more about what we're getting into? Cooper shook his head. The time for talk is over. They called for help, and we're going to give it to them. We're not going as supplicants or servants, we're going as equals, and we're going to remind the galaxy exactly what humans are capable of. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Throughout the human fleet, ships that had been on patrol duties suddenly found themselves preparing for the first journey beyond the solar system in 2 centuries. Marines checked their weapons and armor. Pilots ran diagnostics on fighters that had never seen combat beyond training exercises. Morrison stood in the hangar bay of the Valkyrie, watching his crew prepare for departure. The ship around him was a testament to human engineering, built not for beauty but for survival. Every surface was armored, every system had backups, and every weapon was designed to keep working even when half the ship was destroyed. Nervous? Asked Rodriguez, walking up beside him. Excited, Morrison replied. My grandfather was alive during first contact. He used to tell me stories about the galaxy out there, about all the wonders we'd never see because the aliens were afraid of us. Maybe they were right to be afraid, Rodriguez said. Morrison smiled, and for a moment he looked like a predator showing its teeth. Maybe they were, but now they need us, and that changes everything. The final preparations were completed just as the barriers reached zero power. For the first time in 2 centuries, human space was open to the galaxy. Quarantine that had defined their existence was over. Admiral Cooper's voice echoed through the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Cooper. Today we leave the solar system for the first time in 200 years. We go not as conquerors but as protectors. The galaxy is about to remember what it means to have humanity as an ally. The jump drives powered up, reality bent, and the human fleet vanished into hyperspace. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the void. It's no longer a prison but a home that warriors would return to with stories of the stars. The Deathworlders were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what they saw made even the most experienced officers pause. The space around them was filled with the wreckage of alien ships, their beautiful curved hulls torn apart and drifting in the void. But dominating the scene were the Korech vessels, massive dark shapes that looked like flying mountains covered in weapons. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, studying the enemy through the main view screen. Ships were unlike anything in the human databases. They were enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest human dreadnought, and their surfaces crawled with what looked like living metal. Weapon ports opened and closed like breathing, and strange lights pulsed along their holes. My God, whispered Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, they're huge, sizes and everything, Marson replied, but his voice was tight. What's the tactical situation? Rodriguez worked at her console, her fingers flying over the controls. I count 37 Korth ships in the system. They've established a base on the 4th planet in their strip, mining the asteroid belt. Energy readings are off the charts. Admiral Ryan Cooper's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship. All ships, this is Admiral Cooper. Enemy has spotted us. We're moving to Attack formation, Morrison could see it happening on the tactical display. The Korok ships were turning toward the human fleet. Their movement slow but deliberate, they moved like predators that had never encountered anything that could fight back. Sir called out. Communications Officer Lisa Bennett. We're receiving a transmission from the lead Korok ship. It's in Galactic Standard. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was like grinding stone. Deep in alien unknown vessels, you have entered. Core, surrender immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. These were people who had been born and raised in the confined space of the solar system, but they carried the genes of ancestors who had conquered a death world and spread across the stars. Open a channel, Morrison said. Bennett nodded. Channel open, sir. Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had survived the worst that the universe could throw at him. And GT, ow. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to help. The people you've been attacking, stand down and withdraw from this system. Response was immediate and filled with what sounded like laughter. Humans, the galaxy told us you were extinct. No matter, you will join the other weak species in death. Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We'll see about that. All ships prepare for combat. Remember, these things have been terrorizing peaceful species who don't know how to fight. Let's show them what real warriors look like. Core attacked first, just as Morrison had expected. Beams of energy lanced out from their ships, powerful enough to crack planets. But the human fleet didn't try to dodge or hide behind shields. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the enemy. Fire, the alien weapons struck the human ships and found armor that had been designed to withstand the worst conditions imaginable. The hulls of the human vessels were layered with metals that could survive in the heart of a star, protected by systems that had been tested in the radiation storms of Jupiter. Damage report, Morrison called out as the ship shook around him. Forward armor is holding, report Rodriguez. Hull breach on deck 7, but the bulkheads are sealed, still at 90%. Combat efficiency, Morrison nodded. This was exactly what human ships were built for. They weren't elegant or beautiful like the alien vessels, but they were designed by people who understood that in space everything was trying to kill you, and you had to be ready for it. Launch fighters, Morrison ordered. The hangar bays of the human ships opened, and swarms of small craft poured out. Unlike the sleek energy-based fighters of other species, human fighters were armored boxes with massive engines and kinetic weapons. They were piloted by men and women who had trained in the asteroid fields, where a single mistake meant death in the vacuum of space. Commander Steve Parker led the first wave of fighters from the Valkyrie. He had been born on Luna, where the gravity was low and the radiation was high, and he had spent his whole life preparing for this moment. His fighter, called the Reaper, was loaded with missiles that could punch through the hull of a battleship. Reaper Squadron, this is Reaper 1, Parker called over the radio. Target the weapon clusters on the lead ship. Hit them hard and fast. The human fighters dove toward the massive Korok vessels, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would have killed any other species. They had been trained in the gravity wells of gas giants in the radiation storms of the outer system, and they treated the enemy fire like just another hazard to overcome. The Korak tried to respond with their own fighters, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Their pilots were used to fighting herbivores who fled at the first sign of danger. They had never encountered fighters that accelerated into the attack. It kept coming even when their ships were damaged and burning. Parker's missiles struck the lead Korak's ship and explosions bloomed along its hull, but instead of withdrawing, the human fighters pressed their attack, flying so close to the enemy ship that they were almost touching its surface. "This is Reaper 6, called out Lieutenant Carol Brooks over the radio. "I'm seeing weak spots in their armor, the joints where the living metal meets the ship's structure." "Confirmed," Parker replied. "All fighters target the joints. Let's see how tough these things really are." Meanwhile, the main fleet battle was raging across the system. Korak ships were powerful, but they were used to fighting enemies who would retreat when damaged. The human ships did the opposite. When the Valkyrie lost its forward shields, Morrison ordered full power to the engines and rammed straight through the enemy formation. The Korak had never seen anything like it. Their ships were built for long-range combat, using their superior size and firepower to overwhelm enemies from a distance, but the humans closed the range, turning the battle into a close-quarters fight where human training and determination made the difference. Sergeant Danny Walsh was leading a boarding party onto a damaged Koro ship when he got his first look at the enemy up close. The Korak were huge, easily 8 feet tall, with bodies that looked like they were made of living rock and metal. Their arms ended in claws that could tear through steel, and their eyes glowed with internal fire. "Holy hell," muttered Private Nick Hughes, the youngest member of the boarding party. "They're monsters." "Yeah," Walsh agreed, checking his plasma rifle. "But they bleed just like everything else. Remember your training. These things are used to fighting herbivores. They've never faced a predator species." The boarding party moved through the alien ship, their heavy armor allowing them to survive in the toxic atmosphere that would have killed most galactic species. The Korak defenders fought desperately, but they were facing humans who had been trained in the mining tunnels of the asteroid belt and the war zones of Mars. The battle for the system lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the core fleet was in full retreat, their massive ships limping away from the human force that had appeared from nowhere and torn them apart. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Morrison watched the enemy ships disappear into hyperspace. Around him, his crew was celebrating, but he felt no joy. This had been just the beginning. The real war was still ahead of them. Sir called out Bennett. "We're receiving a transmission from the inner system. It's from the survivors on the planetary colonies." Morrison nodded. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was weak and filled with wonder. It spoke in the musical language of the Luxari, but the universal translator made the meaning clear. "Unknown ships, are you the ones who drove away the Korak? We have been hiding in the deep shelters for months, waiting to die. Who are you? How did you defeat them so easily?" Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. How could they explain that they were the species the galaxy had been afraid of? How could they tell these peaceful beings that they had been saved by the very Deathworlders who had been locked a way for their own protection. This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force, he said finally. We're here to help, won't be back to the system. The response was immediate and filled with gratitude. Earth Defense Force are you, the humans, the ones from the sealed worlds? Morrison smiled. Yes, we're the humans, and we're here to end this war. The news of the human victory at Kepler 442 spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In the crystal halls of the Galactic Council, delegates who had fled in terror just days before now gathered to watch the recordings that their automated systems had captured from the battle. Ambassador Zephyr stood before the main display, his crystalline form flickering with patterns of amazement and fear. The holographic images showed human ships ramming through Korok formations, fighters diving into enemy fire that should have destroyed them, and Marines boarding alien vessels and environments that would have killed any other species. Be real, whispered Council Primalia, her golden tendrils trembling as she watched a human fighter pilot pull maneuver that should have liquefied his body. No living being can survive forces like that, but they are surviving, replied Ambassador Void from the shadows. The humans are not just fighting the Korach, they are winning. In 6 hours they accomplished what our combined fleets could not do in 6 months. The chamber filled with nervous sounds from dozens of species. Thorny rustled their leaves in distress. The voidlings pulsed with alarmed colors. Even the ancient crystalline elders showed signs of deep concern. Dr. Elena Garcia stood at the center of the chamber, the first human to address the Galactic Council in 2 centuries. She was a small woman with dark hair and calm eyes, but her presence seemed to fill the entire space. The delegates had insisted on meeting her through protective barriers, afraid that even being in the same room with a human might be dangerous. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had survived Earth's hurricanes and earthquakes. I understand your fear. The recordings you have seen show humans doing things that seem impossible to you and GT, but you must understand we are not superhum. We are simply the product of our world. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images of Earth. The blue planet looked peaceful from space, but the closer views revealed the truth. Massive storms covered half the surface. Volcanic eruptions sent ash into the sky. Earthquakes split the ground open like wounds. This is our home, Garcia continued. What you call a death world, we call Tuesday. Every human child grows up knowing that the planet itself is trying to kill them. We have hurricanes that can level cities, earthquakes that can split continents, and solar radiation that would cook most species alive. A delegate from the Moss people, his tree-like form swaying nervously, spoke up. But how do you live in such conditions? How do you survive? Arya smiled, and the expression was both gentle and terrifying. We adapt, we overcome, we never give up. When a hurricane comes, we build stronger houses. When an earthquake strikes, we learn to build on flexible foundations. When the radiation gets too high, we develop better medicine. We don't run from danger, we run toward it and find a way to beat it. The chamber fell silent. These species had lived on garden worlds for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle for survival. Their greatest natural disaster was a gentle rain Shower, their most dangerous predator, was a creature that ate plants. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward to join. Garcia, his scarred face and cybernetic implants made several delegates activate. Their emergency shields, Duck Korok, have been terrorizing you because they're stronger than you are, he said. But strength isn't everything. They're used to fighting herbivores who run away. When things get tough, they've never faced a predator species. Predator species? Asked Ambassador Zephyr, his crystal form flickering with confusion. Humans evolved from hunters, Morrison explained. Our ancestors chased prey across continents, killed animals twice their size, and survived ice ages that would have wiped out most civilizations. We didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being peaceful. We became dominant by being better at violence than everything else. The reaction was immediate. Half the delegates fled the chamber. Others began praying to their gods. Went completely dark, too afraid to even emit light. But Garcia raised her hand for silence. Captain Morrison speaks truly, but he leaves out the most important part. Yes, we are capable of great violence. We are also capable of great compassion. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight not because we love war, but because we love peace. She walked closer to the protective barriers, and the delegates could see the genuine warmth in her eyes. Every human soldier who died fighting the Korach, so knowing they were saving lives. Not human lives, but the lives of species we had never met. We came back to a galaxy that had rejected us, not for revenge, but to help. Admiral Ryan Cooper's voice filled the chamber through the communication system. He was speaking from his flagship, still in the outer system where the human fleet waited. Honored delegates, I understand your fear of us, but understand this: we are not here to conquer you. We are here to protect you. The Korach are a threat to all life in the galaxy, and we are the only ones who can stop them. Council primarily a founder voice at last. Admiral Cooper, your forces have accomplished the impossible. You have driven the Korach from 6 systems in less than a week, but the cost... The methods. Watching your people fight is like watching natural disasters take human form. Cooper's laugh was grim. And we are natural disasters in human form. But we're your natural disasters now. The Korach Empire extends across 50 systems. They have armies that dwarf anything you've ever seen, but they've never faced an enemy like us. Recordings changed to show new images from the recent battles. Human marines walking through poison gas that would have killed any other species. Human pilots flying through radiation storms that should have fried their brains. Human ships taking damage that would have destroyed any other vessel, and continuing to fight. We don't fight like you because we can't afford to. Morrison added, on Earth everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We learn to fight back against all of it, and we learn to win. A young delegate from the flower people spoke up, her voice shaking with terror. But what happens when the war is over? What happens when the Korach are defeated? Will you turn on us next? Garcia's expression softened. Child, we have had 200 years to think about revenge, 200 years to plan how we might punish the galaxy for locking us away. But when your call for help came, we didn't hesitate. We came to save you. She gestured to the images of human soldiers helping alien survivors, human Medics treating wounded civilians, human. Engineers repairing damaged cities. This is who we are. Yes, we are. Dangerous. Yes, we are capable of. Terrible violence. But we are also capable of terrible love. We will die to protect the innocent, no matter what species they are. The chamber remains silent for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Zephyr spoke. Dr. Garcia, your people have already saved thousands of lives, the survivors from the attack. Systems speak of human kindness as much as human strength, but the galaxy is afraid. How do we know you won't become the next threat? Garcia looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 100 different species. Because we are not the Korech, we don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to destroy other species. Want to go home to our families and our children and live in peace, but we also want to live in a galaxy where children can grow up safe from monsters. Cooper's voice came through the speakers again. The Korech Empire has a core fleet of over 1,000 ships. They're massing for a final attack on the Council worlds. Our intelligence suggests they'll be here within 20 cycles. Can stop them, but only if we work together. Orlia's golden tendrils moved in patterns that showed deep thought. Admiral, what do you need from us? Information supply, bases, and trust. We're going to end this war, but we need to know that when it's over, we'll be welcome in the galaxy we're fighting to protect. Vote was taken in silence, each delegate placing their hand on the crystal of decision. When the light faded, the choice was made. Okay, the humans would have whatever support the Council could provide. The alliance was official. As the session ended, Zephyr approached Garcia one final time. Dr. Garcia, I must ask, are we safe from your people? Garcia smiled, and for the first time, it was a completely human expression. Warm and genuine. Ambassador, as long as you remain the peaceful species we've come to know, you have nothing to fear. From us, we protect what we care about. And despite everything, we've come to care about this galaxy. The human fleet began moving toward the Korech core systems, carrying with them the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. Deathworlders were no longer locked away in the shadows. They were guardians now, and the universe would never be the same. The final battle began at dawn on the planet Zirian Prime, home world of the Korech Empire. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark ships cutting through the void like knives through silk. Before them stretched the largest concentration of enemy vessels the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Ryan Cooper stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display with the calm eyes of a man who had seen every form of warfare the universe could offer. Over 1,000 Korthok ships filled the space around their home world, from massive dreadnoughts the size of mountains to swarms of smaller vessels that moved like angry insects. Status report, Cooper ordered. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from the Valkyrie. All ships report ready for battle. Admiral, the Korok are moving to intercept us. Cooper nodded. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The Korok Empire had pulled back all their forces for this final confrontation, abandoning their conquered territories to make one last stand at their home system. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history. Open a channel to the Korech fleet, Cooper said. The alien voice that answer was filled with rage and Determination, it was the voice of Warlord Krex, supreme leader of the Corp Empire. Humans, you have interfered with our destiny for the last time. This galaxy belongs to the strong, not to the weak species you protect. Cooper's response was calm and measured. Warlord Krex, this is Admiral Cooper of the Earth Defense Force. I'm giving you one chance to surrender. Stand down your forces and we'll discuss terms. The laughter that came back was like the sound of breaking stone. Surrender to Deathworlders who think they can challenge the might of the Korech. You are outnumbered 10-1. Human, you will die here, and then we will finish what we started with the Council Worlds. Cooper smiled grimly. We'll see about that. All ships, you are free to engage. The battle erupted across the entire system. Core attacked with everything. They had their ships pouring fire into the human formation with weapons that could crack planets, but the humans didn't try to avoid the attack. Instead, they accelerated directly into the enemy fire, her ships taking damage that should have destroyed them and continuing to fight. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was at her post on the Valkyrie, coordinating the ship's defensive systems as enemy fire hammered. Their hull forward armor is down to 60%, she reported. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7. Keep us moving, Morrison ordered. We're not here to play defense. The Valkyrie and her sister ships pushed through the enemy formation like battering rams, their weapons firing continuously. Score had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Their own ships were built for long-range combat, using their superior size and firepower to overwhelm enemies from a distance, but the humans closed the range, turning the battle into a close quarters brawl where human training and determination made all the difference. Commander Steve Parker was leading his fighter squadron through the chaos of the main battle. His pilots were outnumbered 20-1, but they fought with the desperate skill of people who had been trained in the asteroid fields and radiation storms of their home system. Reaper Squadron, this is Reaper 1. Parker called over the radio. Target the command ship. Let's cut the head off the snake. The human fighters dove toward the massive core flagship, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would have killed any other species. They flew through clouds of superheated plasma and fields of deadly radiation, their ships taking damage that should have been fatal but somehow continuing to function. Lieutenant Carol Brooks was flying wing position when her fighter took a direct hit from a Korok weapon. Half her systems went offline. Her life support was failing and her ship was bleeding atmosphere into space, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she aimed her damaged fighter at the enemy flagship and fired every weapon she had. This is Reaper 6, she called over the radio, her voice calm despite the fact that she was probably going to die. I'm making a torpedo run on the command ship. Tell my family I love them. Her missile struck the Korech flagship just as Parker's squadron arrived. The explosions tore through the enemy ship's armor, creating a chain reaction that spread through its hull. The massive vessel began to break apart, its destruction visible from across the system. But the battle was far from over. Fought with the fury of a cornered animal, throwing everything they had at the human fleet. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human ships were taking terrible damage, their crews fighting to keep systems running as explosions rocked their vessels. Sergeant Danny. Walsh was leading a boarding party onto a damaged core destroyer when he came face to face with Warlord Krex himself. The alien leader was even more massive than his soldiers, standing nearly 10 ft tall with armor that seemed to be fused directly to his rocky skin. "So you are the famous human warriors," Craig said, his voice like grinding stone. "You are smaller than I expected." Walsh grinned, checking his plasma rifle. "Yeah, well, we make up for it in other ways." The fight that followed was brutal and desperate. Krex was stronger and larger than any human, but Walsh had been trained in the mining tunnels of the asteroid belt and the gravity wells of the gas giants. He was faster, more adaptable, and most importantly, it never learned to give up. The duel ended when Walsh managed to get behind the alien warlord and put 3 plasma bolts into his back. Krex fell forward, his massive body crashing to the deck with a sound like an avalanche. "This is Sergeant Walsh," he called over the radio. "The Korach leader is down." "Repeat, Warlord Krex is dead." The news spread through both fleets instantly. The Korach ships began to falter, their coordinated attacks becoming desperate and unorganized. Without their supreme leader, the alien empire began to crumble. But Cooper wasn't finished. "All ship, this is Admiral Cooper. The enemy leadership is broken, but we're not here to destroy them. We're here to end this war." He opened a channel to the remaining core forces. "Core fleet, this is Admiral Cooper. Your leader is dead. Your empire is finished, but you don't have to die today. Surrender now and we'll discuss terms." The response came from a dozen different ships at once, their voices overlapping in confusion and fear. The Korach had never surrendered before. They had conquered or been conquered, but surrender was a concept they barely understood. Finally, one voice rose above the others. "Admiral Cooper, this is Subcommander Vex of the Korach fleet. Do we yield? What are your terms?" Cooper's voice was firm but not cruel. "Withdraw from all Council territory. Return to your home systems. End your war of conquest. Do this and we'll leave you in peace." The surrender was accepted across the system. Korthox ships began powering down their weapons and withdrawing from the battle. The war that had threatened to destroy the galaxy was over. 3 days later, Cooper stood in the crystal halls of the Galactic Council, addressing the assembled delegates for the first time since the quarantine had been lifted. The chamber was packed with representatives from 100 different species, all of them watching the human admiral with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Honored delegates," Cooper began, "the Korach Empire has been defeated. Their fleets have withdrawn to their home systems and they have agreed to end their war of conquest. The galaxy is safe." The cheers that erupted from the chamber were loud enough to shake the crystal walls, but Cooper raised his hand for silence. However, he continued, "This victory comes with a price. Galaxy has been reminded that there are threats out there that peaceful species cannot handle alone. A question now is, what do we do about it?" Council Primalia rose from her golden throne. "Admiral Cooper, humanity has saved us all. The Council owes you a debt that can never be repaid. What do you want from us?" Cooper was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "We want to go home. We want to return to our families and our children and live in peace. But we also want to live in a galaxy where children can grow up safe from monsters." He gestured to the holographic display that showed the star map of the galaxy. We propose a new arrangement. Humanity will return to our space, but we will also maintain monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. If another threat like the Korach emerges, we'll be ready to respond. The vote was unanimous. The Shadow Pact was born that day, a secret agreement that would never be recorded in official histories. Humanity would remain largely isolated, but they would also serve as the galaxy's hidden guardians as the human fleet prepared to return to Earth. Ambassador Zephyr approached Cooper one final time. Admiral, we called for help, not knowing what we would unleash. The galaxy is forever changed. Cooper smiled, and for the first time it was a completely peaceful expression. Ambassador, change isn't always a bad thing. You have your peace and we have our purpose. The galaxy is safer now than it's been in centuries. The human ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that would never forget the day the Deathworlders came from the shadows. In the deepest archives of the Council, new entry was sealed. The humans kept their word. They came when we needed them most, and they returned to the shadows when the danger passed. Galaxy sleeps more soundly, knowing they are watching.